Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2026 Houston Open initial research show. Hope you had a much better Valspar than I did. The only saving grace that I had is I played majority of Matt Fitzpatrick at the top of the leaderboard, but my favorite play, Austin Smotherman, missed the cut horrendously. I played a lot of Rio Hitsatsune, who finished in the top 30. That's about it. Not a whole lot to hang my hat on, if you will, for the Valspar. How are your brackets doing? Are your brackets busted already? How do you feel March Madness is going? All of that. And moving forward tonight and the rest of this week for the Houston Open, what do you know of Memorial Park? What do you think of the field this week? So would love to hear from you all in chat or in the comments. It's been a fun weekend for me, although, again, as I said, not very profitable in terms of the Valspar. So we're going to try and turn it around for Houston. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and moving forward are from both Fantasy National and the Rabbit Hole over at BetSperts. The Rabbit Hole has acquired or is merging with Fantasy National, so I'm in the process of migrating my data over to the Rabbit Hole. But go check out the Rabbit Hole. It has everything you need to make the correct wagers and to optimize your lineups week in and week out. Really can't recommend it enough. Tournament Simulator, Lineup Optimizer has everything you need. Go check them out. In the description of the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where normally I put research out every Monday regarding the tournament of the week, some tournament info, patterns of previous winners, players in the field that also fit those patterns. Not sure I'm going to have much for the Houston Open. It's only 2 years of data that I am comfortable with for Memorial Park. We have seen Memorial Park since 2020, but at the inception of the Houston Open moving to Memorial Park, this event was played in the fall. So different grass types, different course layout similarly, and all that. We've only really seen Memorial Park at this time of the year in 2024 and in 2025. So we only have 2 years of data. Not sure I'm going to have anything, but regardless, normally if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the players I've wagered with my own money, the players I'm using most often in my lineups, give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. I've been recommending it now for several years, seemingly. I've enjoyed working with him. You really are missing out if you aren't subscribed to it, so make sure you're doing that. And follow him over on social media. Show him some support. And then lastly, for this intro, we're live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. In addition to everything that I said, how are your brackets doing? How was your Valspar? What do you think of Houston and Memorial Park? So put your thoughts and opinions in chat. If you're not able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's do our initial research for the 2026 Houston Open. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday night with the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. Good evening, Echoes. Thanks for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. Hopefully you've had a good weekend. The March Madness has been going the way you have wanted it to, and Valspar was much better than mine. Need to move on to next week. One of my lineups this week was all 6 players missed the cut. Woof. It was not a very common thing to have 6 of 6 through. I had one lineup that was 6 of 6 this week. I believe the 6 of 6 rate was around 4 or 5%, so it was not very common. So that sounds like you had Sahith, probably Smotherman. Who else were very chalky that missed the cut? Victor Hovland, which I admittedly was very cautious on Victor. Was not all that confident he was going to play well. So hate to hear that it did not sound like you had a very good week. We're going to try and turn it around, obviously, this week for Houston and get prepared for the Masters. Good to see you this evening. We are in Houston, Texas. If it wasn't obvious by the title and thumbnail, the Texas Children's Houston Open. We are in Houston, Texas at Memorial Park. This is actually a public course. One of the best rated in Texas, all of Texas. Has been getting rave reviews since it has opened or reopened, basically. This is originally a John Bridemus design all the way back in 1936, and Memorial Park did host some PGA Tour events way back when, and then the Houston Open moved to the Golf Club of Houston up until 2019, when you see Tom Doak renovated the course with the help of Brooks Koepka. Brooks Koepka was a consultant in this renovation, so it'll be interesting to see if he does stay in the field. He is listed as in the field for now. It'll be interesting to see if he stays in the field, how that ownership and all that's going to look. But Brooks Koepka was definitely a consultant in the renovation. Memorial Park is a very odd par 70. 5 par 3s and 3 par 5s around the course at Memorial Park. One of the longest courses that we will see by par this year. Obviously, Torrey Pines at 7,700 yards is going to be the longest raw yardage that we see all year. But by par, this is going to be one of the longest courses we see. This is a par 70 measuring almost 7,500 yards. So, long, brutal test of golf, although it has gotten easier the past couple of years. We are on the same Poa Trivialis overseeded greens that we have seen recently in the Florida swing. We saw this at Sawgrass. We saw this last week at the Valspar. We'll see it a couple more times. So very, very familiar with this surface. The greens themselves are pretty large, 7,000 square feet, although they will play a little bit smaller than that. There are some pretty big false fronts or pronounced false fronts, some hard edges where slopes that run off into chipping areas and things like that. So the greens will play a little bit smaller than that, but overall pretty good sized greens here. The rough is also kept very short at only 1.25 inches. This is a little bit different from when we saw this event in the fall, when it was pure Bermuda. The Bermuda at this time of year is still dormant, so they have to overseed it for it to be playable and not to kill the Bermuda. So the rough is kept low. It's going to be easier to play out of with the overseed. The fairways, pretty wide, pretty forgiving. 30 to 40 yards wide in most places. I believe the technical average is about 34 yards wide. That's pretty wide, pretty forgiving, and the trees at Memorial Park are pushed away from the fairways, so you are going to have to be extremely offline in order to not find to find tree trouble, I should say. There are not a whole lot of bunkers around Memorial Park, only 24 on the golf course. There are 4 holes with water in play. That is a look at Memorial Park. Again, the key takeaways here, this is what I'll say non-traditional, 5 par 3s and 3 par 5s, par 70. One of the longest courses by par that we will see all year, measuring almost 7,500 yards as a par 70. The same Poa Trivialis overseeded greens that we have seen very much recently, as in Sawgrass, Valspar, a couple other places, Scottsdale. The same Poa Trivialis overseeded greens with rye overseed grass, because the Bermuda is dormant at this time of year, so it will play easier out of the rough, and the rough is kept very, very short. Large greens, 7,000 square feet, but they are generally pretty firm, generally pretty fast. some subtle undulations and slopes. They will play a little bit smaller than this with false fronts, some hard edges that will repel poor approach shots. 4 holes with water in play, and a pretty forgiving set of fairways off of the tee. So here's a look at Memorial Park and the Houston Open. We're going to go to the rabbit hole and bet spurts, see some of the players in the field this week. Unfortunately, Fantasy National has not loaded the field into the database, so we aren't going to be able to see historical performance around Memorial Park, the strokes gained total, page view, if you will. So a little bit of a shorter show this evening, but we'll cover what we can that we normally do without that in the rabbit hole. A fairly solid field for the Houston Open this week. A lot of professionals have garnered or marked this tournament as a good final preparation for the Masters, which is in a couple of weeks. You see world number 1 Scotty Scheffler is here. Wow, not here. Jake Knapp, who's played well in 2026. Nikolai Højgaard continues to play extremely well. Minwoo Lee is your defending champion. Sahith Theegala, Chris Goddard, Ricky Fowler, Adam Scott. So Shane Lowry, Brooks Koepka. Some big names here. It's gonna end up being probably average in terms of strength of field, but some pretty big names here this week at Houston in preparation for the Masters. So the first thing I am going to want to look at, this is one of the longest courses on the PGA Tour. So let's take a look at performance on long courses, shall we? Going back to the beginning of last year, your top performers in the field this week at Houston on long and very long courses are Scotty, Harris English, Kurt Kitayama, Harry Hall, Pearson Coody, Sam Burns, Kevin Roy, Vince Whaley, Ben Griffin, and Jake Knapp are your top 10 in terms of performance on long and very long courses. Normally, I would classify this as difficult. However, the past couple of years have played a little bit easier. There's a little bit of reasoning for that. One is the overseeded rough. This time of year makes it a lot easier to play out of. Instead, if the rough was pure Bermuda, that can be pretty tricky to play out of. But with the overseed, it makes it a lot easier. The around the green here has also become much easier. A lot of that, again, due to the overseeded rough. So, pretty good segue here. We're going to move and look at how the course has played and some metrics here from the rabbit hole. You see Houston Open 2020 to 2022, and then 2024 and 2025. I myself, especially when we start talking about past performance and things of that nature, are only looking at these 2 years. I am excluding 2020 to 2022 because those events were played in the fall. So I want to continually stress that throughout the week. These events were played in the fall. The Bermuda was live and in season. So the course played much differently. If we look at some prior leaderboards, Minwoo Lee winning at 20 under last year. Now Jaeger was 12 under in 2024. But going back into the fall, we had 13 under from Ortiz, 10 under from Kokrak. Finau, I believe, put the ever-living daylights out. No, not a whole. Oh, yeah, he did. That was average, yeah. So Tony Finau gained like 8 on the greens that week when he won in 2022. So the course just plays differently in the spring than it does in the fall. So we're going to be mindful of that. And that is why, again, I'm only going to be using these 2 years with any historical things that I look up this week. Talking about like course performance and things like that. Okay, the rabbit hole describes Memorial Park as very long. Obviously, being a par 70 and almost 7,500 yards. John Brennemus original design, Tom Doak renovation. It has the average scoring conditions as average, which I would tend to agree. 20 under might be a shade on the easier side, but we saw Jaeger at 12 under in 2024. So Memorial Park is still pretty darn difficult. You're not going to see TPC Craig Ranch type numbers. This is going to be a pretty darn difficult test of golf. Very low amount of bunkers, 4 water danger holes, Poa Trivialis greens. They're kept pretty fast, 12.5. I know this says average on the rabbit hole. Fantasy National would classify this as fast. Large greens, driver type or off the tee club type is driver heavy. There are not very many short par 4s around Memorial Park. This is going to force driver in your hand. You're going to have to be very, very good with your driver that week. If we take a look at the scorecard just very quickly, I see a 440, 443. There is one, so I take that back. There are a couple of shorter par 4s at 406 and 382, but you even see the 382 played over par or plays over par slightly. Not a whole lot of short par 4s around here, and you've got a lot of longer par 4s. I mean, Memorial Park will come out and hit you in the mouth. Opening hole, par 4, 522 yards. Plays to a quarter of a shot over par. You have the most difficult hole, 529 yard par 4. Plays to a quarter of a shot over par. You also have 503 finishing par 4, playing to 1500s. Not a whole lot of double bogeys around here. You do have the shorter par 3 15th. Yields a double at 4% guarded by water, or at least the green is guarded by water. But, not a whole lot of doubles, just a lot of bogeys. Almost 30% there, 20%, almost 30%, 20%, 17.5%. Lots of bogeys around Memorial Park, especially if players aren't on top of their game with the driver and with the long irons. So driver heavy. It is medium or average difficulty to gain off the tee. Average in gaining approach. Around the green says difficult. This is a little bit misleading, especially if we look at, say, last year and Minwoo Lee gaining at 2.25 around the green. Most of the top players on the leaderboard were positive in terms of around the green. Jaeger, in his win, all of the players were positive and around the green down to your top, 11 or so. I would classify this as more average. It's gotten easier around the green as years have gone by. I think this is part of factoring in the 2020 through 2022, saying that the around the green is difficult. I would classify this more as average. Putting is average around here, and average par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Anything that jumps off the page to us. Fairway accuracy is pretty difficult just because players are mashing driver. Generally, you're going to be a little bit more inaccurate if you're hitting driver, except for the best drivers in the world. Sand saves are easy. Hitting greens, average, okay. I would have thought maybe difficult, but it says it's average there. Scrambling from the rough is easy, but scrambling from short grass is difficult. A lot of tight lies make chipping around here pretty difficult, similar to sawgrass in that regard. We took a quick look at the scorecard, but we'll take a look at it again. Easiest hole and the easiest holes around Memorial Park are going to be your par 5s. 0.4 of a shot under par here, par 5 third, quarter of a shot on the very long 625-yard par 5, but still plays to a quarter of a shot under par, 1500ths under par. You got a couple other decent scoring opportunities. The mid-length par 4 fifth, the short-ish par 3 second, but that quickly gets to par and over around Memorial Park. Again, no against the course or full tour average course metrics here, so we'll have to look at that tomorrow. We took a quick look at the strokes gained. A little bit surprising to see Minwoo Lee be minus off the tee from last year. Definitely going to have to be good with your long irons. You're going to putt. Obviously, you're going to want to putt well. But it is a little bit surprising to see off the tee, or Minwoo be slightly under field average off the tee. Good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Sung Jae outright crushed. I give you credit for playing Sung Jae. Still did not want any part of Sung Jae. And he played very well at the Valspar. I will give you a little bit of grief, considering you were telling me to guarantee, or you were guaranteeing the Justin Lauer first round leader. Don't think that turned out very well for you. But I also have to give you some props. I believe it was you that talked up Gary Woodland. And Gary Woodland, finished inside the top 20. So you had some good, had some bad. You probably ended up being better off than me in terms of DFS. So not exactly a high bar. I was only saved by the fact that I used Fitzpatrick the most up top and really faded Hovland. But, when I'm 95% Austin Smotherman, who shoots +8, not going to turn out well for me. So 2 straight weeks where my most used player withdraws or misses the cut. So I've not had a very good couple weeks. I'm going to try and turn it around for Houston. But good to see you in chat, Phil. How are your brackets doing? How's March Madness going for you in general? Is your team still playing? All of that. Yeah, so good to see you in chat. We will go back to the players in the field this week, and we'll take a look at a couple of these metrics that we think are going to be pretty important around Houston. We'll start with off the tee. I am going to narrow this in with no filter. Just look at off the tee in 2026. This generally favors distance, which is what you're going to need around Memorial Park. And then we'll look at it in a couple of different ways. But your top off the tee players so far early in 2026 in the field this week for Houston: Minwoo Lee, your defending champion; Marco Pinge, who played extremely well at the Valspar; Keith Mitchell, Scotty, Gary Woodland, Johnny Kiefer, Harris English, Sam Stevens, Pearson Coody, and Michael Brennan are your top 10 in terms of off the tee early in 2026. We can take a look at off the tee. I'll have to expand the time frame. Let's take a look at off the tee when driver heavy or on driver heavy courses. Not very many places where you're able to lay back at Memorial Park. It's going to force driver in your hand, and you're going to have to be pretty good with it. So, on driver heavy golf courses, your top off the tee performers have been Pearson Coody, Michael Thorbjornsen, Jesper Svensson, Kevin Yu, Scotty Scheffler, Marco Pinge, Taylor Pendrith, Aldrich Potgeider, Michael Brennan, and Rico Hoey are your top 10 in that regard. The only other thing that I'm going to look at here, and I'm going to bring this into 2026, I'm going to look at driving distance, not necessarily carry distance. It has been pretty dry, from what I understand, in the Houston area leading up to the tournament this week, and there does not appear to be any rain in the forecast in the Houston area for the tournament. So, because of that, I'm going to look at driving distance as opposed to carry distance. If it had been wet, rainy, I would look at carry distance since it would limit your rollout. but I don't think that's going to be the case. So, your top driving distance players in the field this week, early on this year: Christo Lomprecht, Michael Brennan, Gary Woodland, Marco Pinge, Johnny Kiefer, Isaiah Salinda, Rasmus Højgaard, Chris Gotterup, Keith Mitchell, and Aldrich Potgieter. You can see I want to look at driving distance as opposed to carry distance. Chris Gotterup is a great example of this. Chris Gotterup's only 30th. I say only. He's still very good in carry distance, but 30th. But when you factor in total driving distance, he becomes 8th because he loves to play a lower ball flight and get a lot of run on his driver. So that's why I'm looking at driver distance this week, because it should be firm, should be fast, and players with a lower ball flight could keep up with the big hitters, because generally these guys are hitting it a little bit higher. So here's a look at some quick off-the-tee metrics. I'm not really all that focused on accuracy this week. Somebody's going to have to be extremely wayward for us to want to not consider them, I guess is the best way to put that. And even so, there's not a whole lot of water danger off the tee here. The water danger around Memorial Park mostly is around the green for approaches and things. So the trees don't really come into effect unless players are hitting it way, way offline. So I'm not really all that concerned with a lot of accuracy this week. We'll move to approach. Definitely not going to ignore this. Your top approach players in the field this week for the Houston Open: Ryan Gerard, Brooks, Adam Scott, Marty Ziching Do, Kirk Kitayama, David Ford, Nikolai Højgaard, Chris Gotterup, Sahith Theegala, and Shane Lowry. I don't think the Valspar is in here yet. It is not. So Brooks again playing very well at the Valspar. You know, he might jump up here over Gerard, but these are your top iron players so far in 2026 that's in the field this week. We'll look at overall proximity, and I understand that we don't see the comparison against the average full field or average tour event like we would at, say, PGA National. You see, we don't have this info here. I guess they are working on uploading stuff to the site, would be my guess, is why we don't see this for Memorial Park. But I will tell you, there is a plenty of long iron approaches, as you will get with these long par fours. So, I need to go back to page view. So I'm going to look at overall 200 plus. This might change once we get the exact figures tomorrow on the course fact page. Might change, but I have a strong suspicion that we're going to be looking at 200 plus regardless this week. So your top 200 plus proximity players in the field this week. Some small sample sizes here, be mindful of that, but Chandler Blanchet, who played extremely well at the Valspar, Danny Willett, Neil Shipley, Rasmus Nergard Peterson, Michael Brennan, Thorbjorn Olesen, Rasmus Højgaard, Jake Knapp, Nikolai Højgaard, and Sudarshan Yelamaraju are your top 10 200 plus prox players early on in 2026 in this field. So a Danish invasion in the long irons this week down in Houston. We're not going to ignore around the green. Greens are going to get missed. Pretty tough course. So let's take a look at around the green, and we'll go, I don't want to do too much since we don't have the comparison against tour averages. So let's just take a kind of a big picture look at around the green, and then we'll narrow it in tomorrow in the data dive if we need to. Your top around the green players early on in 2026 in the field this week: Scotty, Ben Griffin, Jason Day, Sahith Theegala, Harry Hall, Patton Kazire, Bo Hostler, Wyndham Clark, Minwoo Lee, and Patrick Rogers are your top 10 around the green players in the field this week. Definitely not going to ignore putting. And much like what we have done seemingly a lot lately, we're going to be looking at Poa Trivialis. So it starts with Innisbrook. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it starts with Harbortown, Innisbrook, Memorial Park. We'll look at the Pete Dye Stadium course. There it is. Pete Dye Stadium course, Quail Hollow, and the TBCs. San Antonio, where we'll be next week for the Valero. So another course typically listed as Poa Trivialis Overseed. TBC Sawgrass, and Scottsdale. We will apply that. Your top putters in the field on Poa Trivialis this week: Sam Burns, Denny McCarthy, Ben Griffin, Chad Ramey, Seabez, Christian Bezadenhout, Billy Horschel, Harris English, Nico Echeverria, Adam Scott, and Scotty Scheffler. Surprising to see Scotty. That has to be pretty recent, right? Oh, yeah. Look how well he's put this surface in the recency. Did very well putting at the Players. Waste management was all positive. The Amex, the 2 measured rounds, were solid. Quail Hollow, when he won the PGA Championship, was great. So, yeah, he's been very good on this surface recently. Interesting to note. Okay. Only other thing we might want to look at, there are 5 par 3s around Memorial Park. So let's take a look at par 3s, and from the start this week, I don't have a good gauge on if we want to narrow in on a specific range of par 3s. It's a good mix here. 155, 167, but you have 216, 202, 237, a good mix of par 3s here. So just overall, your top par 3 performers in the field this week for Houston: Nikolai Højgaard, Stefan Jaeger, Patrick Rogers, Ryan Fox, Adam Scott, Patton Desire, Kevin Roy, Max Grazerman, Pearson Coody, and Bo Hostler are your top 10 par 3 performers in 2026 in the field this week for Houston. We'll probably expand, look at some long par 4s. We'll probably look at some par 5s. But that's really what I have for you all in terms of an initial research. Normally I like going over to Fantasy National, but you see they don't have Houston populated. And if I were to go to, do I have to type it in first, Houston? Yeah. So if I go to Houston Open 2025 and go to multi-year field history, there's nothing here. This is where we normally go, looking at the strokes gained total tab, players who have and haven't played well. If we look at the tournament factors, played difficult round 1 last year, but then easy. But it's normally been pretty difficult. I think it's going to play a little bit easier from now on at this time of year, thanks to that overseeded rough, where it is kept very, very short, not to kill the Bermuda. But greens are generally pretty firm. They're generally kept pretty fast. It kind of depends on the wind, a lot like a lot of other events in Texas. If the wind is calm, you generally have a pretty good time of it. If it gets windy, you can get some big scores out there. So just showing you that we don't have anything for, the strokes gained total, that multi-year field history. It's not populated in Fantasy National. So that's what I have for you all in terms of an initial research. Quite a bit of a shorter show this evening, but we'll make up for it, and we'll really dig in tomorrow night in the Data Dive show. Thanks to Echoes and Phil for jumping into chat. Very much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. Always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Past couple of weeks have not been very good for yours truly, so I'm going to try and get back on the right foot and pick up some momentum as we inch closer to the Masters. So thanks again for all the support. Much appreciated. for all of the wagers that you made this past week at the Valspar, for all the DFS contests you played this past week at the Valspar, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.